happened, I'm sure that you didn't have any forewarning of what was happening, and perhaps you didn't pick up all the significance of the testimony as it came down. You remember the testimony of a young boy that had a van that lived on St. Augustine Street that 2 days prior to the murders occurring in this case, he realized that his tag was missing. Call that testimony? That was the testimony of Randy Ravens. He told you about his tag being 13D11300 was his tag number. And he got up on the morning of January the 13th, the tag was gone. Didn't know what happened to it. Nothing very significant about that, I'm sure, as you listen to the testimony. But you've got to take that testimony and tie it into the later testimony that took place. The testimony of Deputy Keith Dawes. Deputy Dawes saw this man during the early morning hours of February the 11th of 1978. This is 3 weeks after the murders, and the defendant's still in Tallahassee. 3 weeks after the murders. February 11th, early morning hours, about 1:47 a.m., if I remember his testimony right. Officer Dawes was on a special detail, special kind of thing that they were doing at that time, checking people out. He was riding down the street in his car. It's an unmarked police car, but he had his uniform on. He came along and he saw the defendant in this case, standing next to a car parked along the side of the street. He pulled up there and stopped, said, "What you doing?" Said, "Well, I'm looking for a book." Started investigating, looking around, and he saw a tag in the floorboard of that car. When he got that tag out, which just happened to be 13D11300, and went back to his patrol car, what happened? What happened? The defendant in this case ran. Deputy Dawes couldn't catch him. And where did he lose him at? Right in the backyard of the others. He ran directly back to the others, where Deputy Dawes couldn't find him. Why did he run? Why did he run? He didn't run whenever Deputy Dawes first walked up there. He saw Deputy Dawes in his uniform. He didn't run then. When did he run? He ran when Deputy Dawes found that tag. That tag put him in the area of the Dunwoody Street crimes, not more than 100 feet from where it occurred 2 days prior to the murders. Couple that with the testimony of Officer Roy Dickey, the Tallahassee Police Department officer that was on duty the same night as Officer Dawes, and he saw this defendant walking down St. Augustine Street and cut in behind the houses, right there in the same area where the Dunwoody Street assault took place. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a circumstance. Those are circumstances that are consistent with guilt and inconsistent with innocence. What other testimony took place that was of significance concerning that same little episode? You remember the testimony of Officer David Lee? Officer David Lee worked for the Pensacola Police Department. Officer Lee was on duty during the early morning hours of February the 15th. We're talking about 3 to 4 days now after Deputy Dawes had caught this man, or tried to catch him, there in Tallahassee. Officer Lee told you that he stopped this man driving a Volkswagen. Down whenever she said it, I thought it was going to be important later on. She said that either those hairs came from Theodore Bundy or from somebody else who had hair exactly like his. Ladies and gentlemen, how many people in this world could have hair exactly like Theodore Bundy? Huh? I can look at you people on the jury. We didn't stop there though either, ladies and gentlemen. We brought to you a new form of evidence. It took extraordinary means to bring this case to you, to bring the proof to court. The bite mark evidence in this case was extremely important. It related back to Dr. Wood's autopsy of Lisa Lee. Dr. Wood recognized right there at the autopsy that this was a significant piece of evidence, that he, in fact, recognized that what we had involved in this case was a double bite mark, and that it could be important for the later investigation and prosecution of this case. And it was. We brought to you the testimony of Dr. Richard Sudron, the testimony of Dr. Homer Campbell, and the testimony of Dr. Lowell Levine about those bite marks that were found on the buttocks of Lisa Lee. Dr. Wood had already told you that in his opinion, the bite mark was made at or near the cause of death. That's a lot different, ladies and gentlemen, than a fingerprint. We don't know when fingerprints are left, but by George, we know when a bite mark is left. That pathologist, Dr. Wood, testified the bite mark was left at or about the time of death. Dr. Sudron testified, and he showed you, and he demonstrated for you what the analysis was that he made in this case. He took models of this defendant's teeth and compared them to that bite mark. What was his conclusion? With a reasonable degree of dental certainty, Theodore Robert Bundy made that bite mark in the buttocks of Lisa Lee. That was his conclusion. But here again, sometimes the most significant things, perhaps, are the things that come about with very little fanfare. How did he describe it? When asked on cross-examination about the possibility of somebody else in this world having teeth that could have left those marks, what did he say? He said it was like finding a needle in a haystack. A needle in a haystack. How impossible is that? What about the testimony of Dr. Homer Campbell, who testified concerning the photo enhancement that was done of this bite mark photograph? You recall his testimony about how he placed the photograph into the machine and how it came back with what was a topographical map in order to show you the various peaks and valleys that were actually involved in this bite mark. Then we placed on the stand Dr. Lowell Levine, the chief consultant for the New York City Medical Examiner's Office in dental matters. He testified to you that in his opinion, the bite marks in this case, within a reasonable degree of dental certainty, were left by the defendant in this case, Theodore Robert Bundy. Here again, sometimes the most important things and the most significant things are the ones that have no fanfare attached to it. When asked about the possibility of someone else leaving this bite mark, or of someone else even having teeth that could have left this bite mark, he told you that it was a practical impossibility. A practical impossibility. Ladies and gentlemen, you've had the benefit of all the testimony in this case. The eyewitness testimony alone is sufficient for conviction in this case. You couple the eyewitness testimony with the circumstantial evidence that was presented, and then you bring in the scientific evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, based on all of that evidence is what you've got to render your verdict on, not just one little piece of it. The defense in this case put on the witness stand their own dentist in a desperate, last-minute attack to try to put some kind of a dent in that dental evidence that was presented. But they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. On cross-examination, Dr. DeVore, the defense expert, had to tell you, and he did, that the defendant, Theodore Robert Bundy, could have left that bite mark. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense was in a real problem situation. Anytime they've got to put a witness on that tells you that their man could have committed this crime, they've got a real problem. And it was a desperate move. It was a gamble that might have succeeded, but it didn't. That's why I say that you have got to consider all of the evidence that's presented in this case. And there's only one conclusion that you can reach. Only one conclusion that you can reach. Based on the oath that each of you took as jurors in this case, to base your verdict on the evidence, to follow the law that the judge instructs you on. Ladies and gentlemen, it is your duty to return a verdict of guilty as charged in this case.